Hi, welcome to the Fall 2018 State-hosted Physics Colloquium. My name is Tony Rodriguez. I'm a junior studying physics here, and I'm introducing our speaker for today, Mr. Phil Deutschle. Education, so he's Associate of Science in Physics, cum laude from Los Angeles Valley College, Bachelor's of Science in Mathematical Physics, magna cum laude, California State University, Northridge, and Master's of Science in Astronomy with honors from Swinburne University of Technology. Among his awards, the John W. Nagel Award, Outstanding Senior in Physics, while he was at Cal State Northridge, Arizona Science Teacher of the Year in 2000, and the Brennan Award, Top Astronomy Educator in North America from the Astronomical Society of the Pacific in 2012. His publications include dozens of magazine articles on topics from language learning to bicycle helmet safety. He's the author of 2 books, The 2-Year Mountain, and Journey Through Nepal, and Across African Sand, Journeys of a Witch Doctor's Son-in-Law. He's the writer and co-director of the award-winning documentary Searching for Nepal. He was my high school astronomy teacher, and I am very excited to be able to introduce him here for you all today. Mr. Phil Deutschle.
Thanks, welcome. I'm happy to be here. If you have trouble hearing me, I would suggest move closer. So I mean, now you know a little bit about me, but I want to get a little idea of my audience. Who here is not associated with Stanford in one way or another? Just a few, okay. How many are professors, instructors, post-grad students, grad students, undergrads? How many have studied physics in one way or another? Okay, all right. So let me tell you a few things about, and of course the clicker doesn't work. It worked before. A few things about physicists. Only 0.3% of undergraduate degrees are physics majors, 0.3%. If you poll college students, they typically say the hardest major is physics. For all undergraduate majors, about 2 to 3% eventually get a doctorate. For physics majors, 20 to 30% get doctorate degrees. That is far higher than the second highest one. Far, far higher. The major that has the highest percentage acceptance into medical school are physics majors. Basically, this means if you're doing physics, you can do just about anything. Right? This is called sucking up to the audience, in case you were wondering what that is. Right? So, but it also means...
It's a clicker.
Let's try it, yeah, because it looks like it's the exact same one.
Okay. Then we'll click clicker.
Wonder if it will get my signal instead. Ah, there we go. All right, so when I get the invitation to speak here, I thought, oh great, I can talk about my gravity-assisted capture mechanism of planetary irregular satellites and a tidal fragmentation model of satellite family origin. Or maybe you wanted to hear about small-scale suburban radio astronomy. But no, I asked, what do you want to hear about? And this is what I was told. Often these talks are aimed at presenting some cutting-edge research in the field, but that often means that all the students are completely lost by slide 5. Today I heard a postgrad said that she was usually lost after slide 1. So that's not what we're looking for. I think we're looking for something more focused on outreach, teaching, and pedagogy. Or finding fulfillment in your work. It would also be great to talk about topics like your experiences teaching science in different areas, learning to understand what teaching style and habits would benefit your students the most, learning how to communicate difficult scientific concepts in foreign languages, struggling to find a fulfilling balance between work and personal interests, or comments on the ability of astronomy to convey powerful ideas to communities around the globe despite socioeconomic status and previous education. The interesting word here is focused? Like, focused? That's a whole life of stuff. Okay, so I will try to focus. So now I'm calling this Botswana to Bolivia, because it's alliterative. Life of an itinerant science teacher. So here's the world. This is kind of a summary of where I've been. And every time I look at this, I go, oh, wait a minute, I forgot that trip in Peru. And I forgot that trip through there and there. And the parts in green are the parts I've done by foot or bicycle or canoe. So we can't cover all of that. So we're going to focus on a few places: Southern California and Nepal and Denmark and Botswana and the Navajo Nation and Bolivia and where I am now in Salinas. Okay, so big things that people ask me is, when did I start traveling and how long have you been teaching? So when did I start traveling? Well, I was conceived in New York, but I was born in California, and by the time I was 5, moved back to the East Coast. So I generally say I started traveling before I was born. And I think somehow that set up some sort of imbalance in my psyche. So I always feel like I should be someplace else. Or I feel like nowhere really seems like home, so I might as well be anywhere in the world. All right, so I grew up in this little place called Woodcliff Lake, New Jersey. And yeah, it started with a one-room schoolhouse. That was there. That was an art building, it was a music building, it was all different stuff. I don't know how old I am here. 8, 9 years old. But the people that study physics, you look at this and go, oh yeah, I used to do stuff like that. Yeah. So I was playing with wind and air, and we had a fan, and I was adjusting. So I used these toothpicks so I could adjust the angle of the pieces of cardboard, and I could hold it by the fan and see how it caught the air for lift and different things. And I didn't realize that the other 99.7% of the people in the world didn't do stuff like that. It was just those 0.3% of physics people that think that's fun. And we play with that stuff all the time. All right, so when did I start teaching? Do you remember in elementary school and they said, oh, figure out the surface area of a rectangular prism. And you're like supposed to multiply this side and this side and this side and this side and that side and multiply and double them and add them all up. And then they said, okay, we're going to make it simpler by doing this. Like, I'm supposed to multiply 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 times? Like, you got to be kidding me. That was way too much work, and I made way too many mistakes. So I thought, well, what if we just think of this as flattened out? We can make it into just 2 rectangles. And that seemed obvious to me, also because I was just plain lazy. So like, and when I was showing, like when I was doing it this way, the teacher was saying, no, you can't do it like that. Yeah, but it's the same, because if you just think of this thing flattened out, then you have that. Philip, will you go to the board and explain that to the class? And that's when I started teaching. And I didn't realize till much later that the fact that people couldn't figure that out meant those people, those of us that study physics, we think about the world a different way. We view things, we visualize things a different way that a lot of people can't. And that's one of the reasons that so many people have trouble teaching physics, because we kind of assume that other 99.7% can think about things the way we do, and they don't. So, they don't think like you do. You have to learn the language. So just yesterday, this phrase came up. Can you read it? It says, acting on a body. That phrase came up, and we all know what that means. Oh yeah, acting on a body, that makes sense. Acting on a body? What does that mean, like performing Shakespeare on a body? But we know, oh, that's pushing or pulling on something. But we say acting on a body, and that makes perfect sense to us. But if we're going to communicate, we better learn the language. All right, so what's next? I moved back to the other side of the US, to a place called Sylmar, California. When I looked up what's happening in Sylmar, I found this. New science standards, hard sell for cash-strapped Sylmar High School. That's where I went to school. Years later, I found out that Sylmar High School is ranked among the bottom 10 high schools in California. Bottom 10? California is a really big state. If you're going to be one of the bottom 10, you got to be really bad. But that's where I went to high school. But I spent summers working at a camp up in the Sierras with the Scouts. How many people have been involved with scouting in one way or another? Boy Scouts, Girl Scouts, you know, Weeblos, Cub Scouts, 4-H, they're all kinds of similar things. And they have a similar educational strategy which is really good. It's based on competencies, not based on grades. Like if you learn it, you keep learning something until you're know it well enough to pass a test, like a driver's test, and then you move on. And you don't move on until you show you're competent at that. And once you are competent at it, you become the educator, the teacher for the next group. And so it reinforces you. That is the way the world works, not the way it works in schools where you're like, okay, you got a D, you're ready to go on. So they had a phrase that they used called kismet. Does anybody know kismet? It's great. It's called keep it simple, make it fun. Like, oh yeah, that's really good educational strategy. Keep it simple enough that people can understand and make it fun. But I turn it the other way around. If I'm not having fun, I know my students aren't having fun. So I want to have fun. And they can follow along. All right, so I make things fun. All right, so I ended up at San Fernando Valley, at Los Angeles Valley College, which is a 2-year college, a community college. I'm not going to apologize for that. But I got work at a factory that did gold leaf on bathroom fixtures. Anybody had the, I don't want to say pleasure, the opportunity to work in a factory? Oh yeah. So when you work at a factory, you know, you think, okay, I got a job. And here's what Dale Carnegie said. Success is getting what you want. Okay, you got a job. But happiness is wanting what you got. And if you're working on a factory, there's one thing that governs everything. It's the clock. And notice this clock? It's not moving. And that's how I found it was when I worked nights, went to school during the days, and I would play games with myself. I thought, oh, time can go so slow. I said, okay, I'm not going to look at the clock until 10 minutes have gone by. And I would do my work, and I'd do my work. It's been 10, 15 minutes. I'm not going to even look at it till it's at least a half hour. And okay, it's got to be half an hour. I look, it's been 4 minutes. Like, how can time go so slow? So I made a promise to myself. I made a pledge there, working in the factory. I made a pledge that for the rest of my life, I would only take jobs that were so interesting, important, or fun that I'd be willing to do them for free. And I ended up being a volunteer and working pretty much for free almost my whole life. But it's been so worth it, yeah. Until I realized, wait a minute, I have to earn something for retirement, buy a house, but I still do stuff I would do for free. Ended up at Cal State Northridge, that has a great solar observatory there. And I was tutoring. Also at Valley College, I started tutoring. So I tutored my way through college. And I learned so much about communication and education based on tutoring. Because if you're sitting one-on-one with a student and they don't get it, and you explain it and they still don't get it, you better learn another language. And I learned ways to try to communicate. I learned what people are having troubles with. So I think anybody that wants to be an educator should spend time tutoring, talking to just one student. Instead, it's really easy to talk to a group of people and say, any questions? And nobody puts up a hand like, wow, I really taught you well. No questions at all, right? Or you ask a question, so what is the formula for such and such? And one person got it. Well, if somebody has it, they must all have it. So tutoring is really good for that. And also, it means you get to reinforce everything that you've ever learned. I learned so much better having tutored stuff. That's just a picture I found somewhere. I also worked at physics labs on campuses. And that was so much fun. Making equipment. This is like a museum piece. Like, look at wait a minute, that stuff's really old. And so that's Cal State Northridge. And if you look at it, you realize that's the Oviatt Library, but it starts looking a little bit familiar. Like, wait a minute, I've seen that before. Anybody recognize it? That's Starfleet Academy. So I graduated from Starfleet Academy without even knowing it. And if you look at the wider pictures, apparently there's a Golden Gate Bridge right in the background. So these are my fellow physics graduates. And if you look at the list, you notice almost no women, almost none. And I can't remember at that time any of my professors being women, none. Not in physics, not in mathematics. That's changed quite a bit now, but yeah, that's me, the third one down. But I was really good at this stuff. Like I was the top one in my class. They put my name on a plaque and it's there, just like those plaques that you have in the buildings here. But at the same time, I was going to things like this and listening to lectures on some cutting edge thing. And I remember one in particular was this team that was analyzing diffraction patterns through a particular type of crystal. And they worked on this for years and years and years. And their final result was, well, there was really no interesting phenomena there. Which somebody needed to try that. But, you know, through my senior year, I was getting disillusioned. I loved physics. I loved learning physics. But I was uncertain about what I really wanted to do with it. I mean, and here, so this like diffraction patterns through crystals. So what to do after your undergraduate work? Go to graduate school? Go to work? The jobs were in aerospace, graduate school, just I wasn't feeling it. So this is what I did. I left the country, I went to Nepal, so I joined the Peace Corps. But I don't think I joined the Peace Corps in order to escape, you know, continuing in physics, but rather than I wanted to do one of those things I said. I wanted to do something so interesting, important, or fun that I would do it for free. And working in Nepal with the Peace Corps, I earned $3 a day, so that was pretty close to free. And the slogan at the time was the toughest job you'll ever love. So I was Peace Corps in Nepal. And lots of Nepal hasn't changed much since there. So I was a Peace Corps volunteer there I was in the country for almost 3 years. And then I went back years later. This is what I can remember at this time showing this very picture to my aunt and uncle. And they said, oh, but people don't live like that now. I said, yeah, I just took that picture. So yeah, they lived like that. All right, so this is the village I ended up with in Karka, Nepal, teaching science and math, and the red dot doesn't show it, but that's my window right there. That's my little house. Lived in a little house there. And there's this kids lined up singing the national anthem, and there's the school. I'm going to show a little video clip. So these things that are underlined are little video clips, and for some reason my computer thinks that like it's all dangerous.
This was the toughest job I'd ever had. It was hard living in a world so different from anything I had ever known. 6 days a week, earning just $3 a day, I taught chemistry, health, forestry, even astronomy. I was trying to teach in a language that I barely understood, with almost no equipment. My students, they had never ridden in a car, never seen a movie. They had never experienced electricity. Everyone in the village was seeing a Westerner for the very first time. Not even the other teachers knew what to make of this strange foreigner living amongst them.
So that's a page from one of the textbooks. And so images like this, like that thing to the right, this red dot really doesn't show. There, those two arrows, that says prakash, which means light. And we see those shapes, we think, oh yeah, we know what that is, that's a lens. Most people look at that, they don't know what that means. That's just some weird drawing, stuff like that. Down here at the bottom to the right, that says Gambarta Ago Baleko, which means making fire from light. And the prakash for sunlight showing making a fire. So this was one of the textbooks. And you saw the one they showed in the video clip. I'd written bright, brighter, brightest, because I was like translating everything, trying to learn how to teach. So this is me teaching class, and I've got a piece of paper in my hand because I taught all in the Nepali language, and so I would go into class with a vocabulary list. I would spend about 2 hours to prepare each 45-minute lesson, just trying to figure out what I was going to say and how I was going to say it. But the students were incredibly excited. In fact, there was a problem because, see, there's no lights or anything. The only lights was from windows on the side. And students from other classes would crowd around the windows and make it so dark in there we couldn't see. So I'd have to shoo them away, like, get away from the window so we have enough light so they can see what I write on the board. The board is just made out of chunks of wood that they've chopped with an axe and rubbed with charcoal from the fire. And chalk that I would carry up the mountain from Kathmandu. There it is, me with the paper in my hand trying to teach a class. So if you look at that script, it looks just horrible. Like, it looks like, how can you know? But it turns out it's totally phonetic. That's Ramro Kam, Garnahunchulai, which means like to do good work, something like that. But the alphabet is totally structured. It goes by where your mouth makes different sounds. Some are nasal sounds, some are aspirated sounds, and it's structured. I've never seen any other alphabet like this. And it's been around for a few thousand years. But again, any type of teaching I found that was most useful, I had students doing stuff. So if I had them doing stuff, it was much less dependent on my language abilities. Here we're talking about something with saturated and unsaturated solutions. I actually had a test tube. Okay, so one thing they asked me, when they heard that I knew science, the first question they asked was asking me about water. So we had, actually I'll just show the picture here. So this is, you're going to look at me in my underwear while I tell the story. We had this hillside. The village was on top of a ridge. Well, top of a ridge isn't a place where there's much water. But we had one hillside where there was kind of a slope, and we had this catchment basin, a little rock, and it would hold water, and then there would be this little spout. That was the water supply for the entire village. And there was these big trees that grew around it, and they cut down some of the trees to get wood to help build some new parts of the elementary school. And one of the first things they asked me said, well, we have a problem here. Trees use water, right? Yeah, trees use water. So how come when we cut down the trees, we get less water? Because shouldn't there be more water? Because now the trees aren't drinking the water. And that made sense. I didn't talk about roots and stuff, but I tried to explain it that, well, trees also block the sunlight. And as you cut down the trees, the sunlight dries up the ground and the water's gone. So the solution was to try to plant trees, but it's also an area that is grazed by cows and goats and water buffalo. And a little planted tree is just like, dessert, yum. So there's another little video clip that explains a little bit about what we did. If I can get the cursor, come on cursor, I hate touchpads. There it is.
Isocarpa looks very green now, but years ago, deforestation was a big problem. The loss of trees, besides the need for firewood, harmed our water supply and even threatened the farmland. As time went on, the water situation became desperate. And the solution was to try to plant trees. But in an area like this, it's also used for grazing of cows and water buffaloes and goats. You just plant a tree, the first thing that happens is the goat comes on and eats it. So we decided to make a system of protecting the trees with bamboo strips and wire. Krishna Bhakti and I went all over the neighboring communities collecting bamboo, or we cut strips. I bought wire in Kathmandu and carried it up to the village, taught students how to use pliers to cut wire and make little rings. And we made all of these little protection rings that protected all of these trees on this hillside. And the result is that it's turned from an area that was pretty much barren into a jungle. Now the idea of planting trees and managing the forest has taken root. Our water supply and farmland are preserved.
Yeah, so decades after I was a Peace Corps volunteer, I went back to my village and made a documentary about it. But so we planted trees and we got water again. So this, if you notice, this looks like a classroom, but like, how come there's such big kids and little kids right next to each other? And that's because this is testing. Now, the problem with testing in Nepal is the kids all cheat. I mean, because they're just helping each other. But also in Nepal, Nepalis read aloud. When they read, they speak. And they also write aloud. They speak as they write, which, if you know the brain, is really good. It activates the brain really well. You learn something much better if you're speaking as you read it and speaking as you write. But it doesn't work very well if you're giving a test, because every student is reading the questions and speaking their answers. So as a school, when we had big exams, they would take the classes and mix them up. So it'd be a 10th grader sitting next to a 3rd grader and sitting next to a 5th grader and mix them all up, and that we'd be doing different tests, which means it was really loud in there, but it also means that the cousin in 10th grade is sitting next to their cousin in 3rd grade and telling them what to write. But there was everybody got good scores, yay. So I did it differently. I took my students outside and spread them out in the dirt and had them do their testing. Well, they have these big national exams at the end of the year. And in my district, when I was first teaching there, nobody in the entire district had ever passed the national exam. Nobody. That first year, we had a student that passed. And then he came back the next year as a teacher. But the following year, every one of my students passed the math test. I'm going, what? How could they possibly have passed? They didn't know that stuff. I think what happened is they got really good at cheating. When they were spread out like that, they had to find much, much more elaborate ways. I don't know if they're tapping out code. I know one time I got a paperback that was all folded up like this. And the name was written with a different color pen and hand style than the rest of the test. Like, huh. And I was reading them. I found the one that was exactly the same. And I called the students and they had to confess. And decades later, they're still talking about it. Oh, remember, you caught that one cheating. Yeah, so they got really good at cheating, so they did really well. So here's one of the lower class. Notice how many girls there are? 2. And that's the lower grades. In the lower grades, a lot of girls were in this class. But once we got to the high school, this was all the girls in the high school. All of them. So very few girls were going to school. That was back in the 70s. Now when I went back a few years ago, they were very proud. It was 50-50. It was so incredible. A big part of it is recognizing the importance of education and realizing that, like, wait, girls can do anything boys can, and they are just as useful. Just as useful. So that has changed a tremendous amount. So I wanted to find out what happened to some of my students. So let's see. How come the cursor disappears every time? Anybody see the cursor? There it is, there it is. Yeah, I heard you.
Watching all of these old guys, my former students, running across the field, I'm impressed by what they've become, despite the odds. Some of them actually made it to university. Surendra has become a drinking water engineer. Shomutapa is an international banker. my very top student, Ram Prasad Nepal, is now the headmaster of his home village school. Many of my students have become teachers. I'm proud of them. Today, because of the training meeting, teachers have come from all around the district. Shockingly, a third of the teachers in the district are my former students. If I had left any kind of lasting outcome from my Peace Corps experience, this is it.
So I'm still shocked by that literally a third of the teachers in the district were students that I had. And I don't know why. Maybe there was just, that was the wave, that there was the first ones that actually graduated high school and then they became teachers. I don't know if they were inspired or what happened. All right. Eventually I did leave Nepal. Can't stay there anywhere forever. It took me 3 years to get back to California. And at this point I realized, you know what? I worked summers teaching at camp. I worked my way through college tutoring. I've been teaching with the Peace Corps. Maybe I ought to become a teacher. Now that I've been doing it for so many years and I seem to enjoy it and be successful at it. So I went and got my teaching credentials. So I went back to Cal State Northridge. And oh yeah, it was destroyed by an earthquake. Both my high school and college were both destroyed by earthquakes. I think that's some sort of, but not while I was actually students there. So I got my teaching credential, and I want to give a shout out, because everybody has somebody, some educator that has a big impact. This is Jose Luis Vargas, who gave me jobs several times, like gave me recommendations, always supported me. And that's him sitting with my daughter years later. So I worked at an EOP program, that's Educational Opportunity Program. And Educational Opportunity Program is a program that recruits students that normally wouldn't be at the university. So a lot of them were from educational backgrounds that didn't meet the requirements to be admitted. Some were on special programs. They were recruited because they're minorities or language deficient or language learning or ex-cons, all kinds of people. And I worked in a program called Student Support Services, which did tutoring, but we also did a bunch of other things. And I worked specifically with the math science tutors, teaching them how to tutor, but we also did workshops. So we did workshops on time management, we did one-on-one tutoring, small things, and the supervisor of the program wanted to find out what factors had the biggest influence on our students. And in particular, they wanted to study these two courses. We had two courses called Math 094 and 095, which they were pre-college math. And none of the math teachers wanted to teach this course because they considered it beneath them. It wasn't college level math. And so to make it even, all the math teachers had to do 1 or 2 sections of this class, which they hated. And when the leader of our EOP program found out that I knew statistics, she asked, like, Philip, can you do a statistical analysis? We want to be able to see which one of our programs really affect our students' success. Tutoring and this and this, and they had all kinds of data on the students' backgrounds, test scores, all sorts of things. And so I crunched the numbers on all of those, and I found that, like, all these different things had an effect. Tutoring helped, and our workshops helped on time management and large group and small group. All those things had effect, what their parent background was. But the one thing that had the biggest effect on whether or not our students were a success was the teacher. The teacher. So I was just looking at our EOP students, which were mostly minority students, and we had certain teachers that we found out that none of our students passed. And in these classes, they all took the same exams. Same time, all scored the same way. So So it was a great experiment. And there are other teachers that all of our students passed when they had that teacher, and none of our students passed when they had that teacher. So when this was published, the math teachers had a fit. Because of course, those students failing could not possibly be because of them. It had to be because, oh, they didn't know arithmetic before they took the course. Oh, they had bad attendance. Oh, they had bad study skills. Oh, they had all kinds of problems. That wasn't them. The teacher is the number one. And still, teachers like this do not want to know this, that the number one determiner of how a student does is the teacher. Ouch. All right, what's next? I went to Denmark. I went to Denmark, and my education was of no use at all. My teaching credential, my degree in physics, it wasn't valid for anything. So I got a job as a pedagoog-medhjælper, an assistant at a fritidshjem, where we had like, it was kind of like a club for kids. And I had this idea, I said like, oh, you know what? We were doing all these activities, painting and stuff like that, and I put up a dark room and such. And I thought, well, would it be really good, you know, we've got these Danish kids that like are really pretty well off. What if we do something for somebody else? So what if we do this fundraising thing? And I realized if we get enough groups, we could actually bicycle the distance from Denmark to Africa in one day, in 24 hours. So we put together this huge bicycle relay. And when I first mentioned it to my colleagues, I said, I got this idea. What if we like get all these other institutions and we do a bicycle relay and raise money for Africa and blah, blah, blah. And they all looked at me and like said, what? Are you serious? How would you even start? I said, well, I'd send a letter out to everybody asking who wants to come to a meeting to plan it. And so we did it. And we had this huge thing. We raised thousands of krona, and we had I couldn't find any of the photographs, so I have to take pictures from the newspaper. So this says, Aarhus Børn cykler træer to Africa. Says the children of Aarhus as a town bicycle trees to Africa. 5,107 kilometers in one day, raised 25,000 krona to plant trees in what's it called when there's no rain? Drought. See, when I'm speaking Danish, I can't think English. Tørke. That means dealing with in Zimbabwe. All right. So I started realizing, yeah, if I had some idea, I should think big. So that was a big thing. All right. So from there, I decided to go to Botswana. So here's Mapoka, Botswana. And yeah, I lived in a grass-roofed hut, which was way cool. A round building is really, really cool. Birds would come and live inside the grass, which made everybody think I was a sorcerer, because only a sorcerer can have birds living inside the house. And I said, no, these type of starlings like living inside a roof, but it didn't matter. I'm going to skip the music part of this one and go straight to some of the successes we have. I taught at Butnani Community Junior Secondary School, so basically a middle school. And we had the same number of boys and girls, because that's how we admitted. Each class had 40 students, 20 boys, 20 girls. 20 boys, 20 girls. But there's a lot in the class. After I was there for a couple years, they lowered it down to just 35 students. But the way they did it was just by refusing admission to so many students. So it just means there was more kids that didn't get to go to school. That's how they did it. All right, so here they are. And I found that if I did things with students, they would be very, very active. So I started playing around with the idea of science fair stuff. So I had students doing different science fair projects. I really don't like the science fair as a competition. I don't think science is a competition, but in Botswana it was important to have competition. And these two groups, both of these teams made it to the National Science Fair. The National Science Fair. And I can remember really clearly, they had never seen an escalator. They had never been in a place with a flush toilet or running water or slept in a bed or seen an escalator. They'd never seen a movie. We went and watched a movie, and they were asking me, so how much of that was real? I said, well, it was actually filmed, but they pretended it all. Like, well, so is that real? Well, yeah, but it's acted. And they didn't quite get the concept, right? Because there's people getting shot and stuff like that. So they really shot. No, they pretended. Like, but I can remember walking through the university with my 4 students, and the only other people who were there were from like big schools, like the big schools in towns and stuff like that. And we were from this little village up by the Zimbabwe border. And some people said, psych, like, you know, who are those two? Oh, they've got a project, blah, blah, blah. And they said, well, who are them? They have a project. Wait, you've got 2 teams at the National Science Fair? Yep. We had 2 teams there. And this group, they won. They took first place. And that's the National Minister of Education handing an envelope. And they had no idea what was in the envelope. And they came and handed them to me. Like, I don't know what's in here, it's sealed. I said, do you want to open it? You know, should we open it here? We open it back at school? Should we open it? They said, no, let's wait till the end of year graduation ceremony and open it then. So they had me hold on to this for months. And in it was a lot of money. A lot of money, it was really big. So here's all these students. I had lots and lots of students. And this was a small village. Now, in a village this size, there's the boys, there's the girls in the class. 90% of the families in this village, Mapoka, are dependent on somebody in town sending money back to the village. Only 10% of the families are self-sufficient. This is very common in third world countries. You need somebody in town actually earning cash. So 90% of the families needed somebody in town to earn money. In order to get a job in town, you needed an education. And the educational system in Botswana was like a pyramid. Everybody, or almost everybody, could go to elementary school that was close enough to an elementary school. But then they had an exam that determined if you could go to junior secondary school. And another exam that determined if you went to senior secondary school, another exam. And there was exams between each of these. So my level was right here. I taught junior secondary school, and there was an exam that determined if they got into senior secondary school. And that was the key thing. If you made it to senior secondary school, you did not have to pass an exam to graduate. You had to pass an exam to get to university, but you would just complete. And if you completed, which means if you were managed to pass this exam with a high enough score to get to senior secondary school, you were guaranteed of work. You could then go back to the village and work as an elementary school teacher. You could work in business. So for my students, this exam determined whether or not their families were going to eat. For 90% of the families. And I taught both science and math. And they had 6 subjects. So for a lot of my students, I was 2/3 of their education. And I learned if I just drilled them to death, I could make their math and science scores so high that they could fail English and social studies and still make it into senior secondary school. And I would see students like, where is he? This one, right here. He was his family's only hope. Because his other 2 older siblings, they had already failed out, and his younger brother was an idiot. Just dumb, just really dumb. He wasn't even going to make, I saw him in elementary school, he was not going to make it even to the middle school. So he was his family's only hope. This was really tough, and this is what I learned from the experience. If you try to carry the weight of the world on the shoulders, it's going to crush you. It was like I was exhausted because I worked my students so hard. And I'm still in contact with some of them. But I eventually left there. This is my family. This is my family. There's Shobi and Ruben and Kaho and Tabona. And there they are. There's Tabona and Kaho and Shobi and Ruben. I'm Facebook friends with Shobi. So where to go next? I went back to California. Went to Sacramento. Oh yeah, so the Sacramento looks like this, but that's not where I lived. I lived in a place that looked like this. And I had my daughter with me. She was 1.5 years old, so I was a single dad. And I decided to start a tutoring business. I called myself Professional Tutoring. And I put signs up around all the colleges in Sacramento. And there's a lot. There's community colleges, there's Sac State, there's private colleges. I put signs up in laundromats everywhere saying I had this tutoring business. And yeah, I started tutoring. And so I could work right from home. I was cheap. But every so often, I'd be there and a new student would be coming. And I'd see a car, like, they'll take this corner and drive up and like turn around and drive away. They'd say, if this is professional tutoring, I had a sign up on the mailbox that said, we don't want this. But part of the place I worked at a place as well called Options for Recovery. And I don't have any pictures because it wasn't appropriate to take pictures. This was a center for recovering substance addicted women with small children. A very narrow clientele. So it's only women in there. It was like, me and the guy delivering the mail was the only male that ever set foot in this place. There was no restroom for men. I had to go to the kids' restroom to use that because there was little kids there. But I worked with women that most of them had dropped out of school in 4th to 6th grade. They had never had any success in their life, educationally or anything else. The fathers of their kids are almost all incarcerated. And they were in the recovery program. They were substance addicted, all kinds of different substances they were addicted to. And for years, part of the recovery program said education. And for years, they would just tick a box that said, not being addressed at this time. Like somehow education wasn't important. Until I was tutoring somebody that knew somebody and they said, oh, Philip, can you come and make an education program for these women? Sure. I had no idea what I was doing. Sure, I can. Because I was tutoring, so they would bring me there and I would have a group of 4 or 5 or 6 and we'd do some reading and writing and we'd do some math and I started teaching them algebra without using the word algebra so they wouldn't be terrified. And the idea was they're supposed to get their GED, but I realized, you know, GED isn't really what they need. What would really be great is if they would start taking college classes. Because they were smart enough, they just never had any success. So I was getting them to like go and apply at Sacramento City College in Consumnes and American River Community College. And they started taking college courses, some of them. And some of them relapsed and like really horrible things happened, like the woman that fell asleep on her baby. I don't know what the moral of that is. Life can be tough. I guess that's the moral. Everyone deserves a chance. I don't know the moral. But while I was living there, I'd never owned a car. So I put my 2-year-old daughter on the back of the bicycle and I decided, let's take a little bicycle trip. So we bicycled over the Sierras and across Nevada and Utah and Arizona and back. So we bicycled 2,099 miles that summer. She had her 3rd birthday at the Grand Canyon. But along the way, we went through part of the Navajo Nation. And I thought, oh, this place looks pretty interesting. So I talked to some women. I said, oh, should I come back here and teach? And she said, yeah. So that's what I did. So next we went to the Navajo Nation, went to Red Mesa on the Navajo Nation. That's the trading post. And that's the high school. And they were very proudly called the Redskins. And I won't go into the politics of that. I have very few pictures I took of students because this is what they would do. See this guy covering his face? If I pulled out the camera, they immediately turned away, covered their face. They did not want to have their picture taken. This is at the National Native American Science Bowl. I took my students to the Science Bowl. First year we got just creamed. But after a couple years, we made it to the quarterfinals and then got creamed. So here's also students turning their faces. So one of the things they asked me is, why are you here? Because they were used to teachers at that school, like apparently were just driving down the road and ran out of gas or their cars broke down and looked for a job. Many of the teachers there were there because they couldn't get work anywhere else. Or they loved Indians. Oh, they're so spiritual. I just want to work on the res. Or they were filled with missionary zeal. They wanted to save these Indians by educating them. And so they would ask me, why are you here? And I would just say, oh, I'm just here to teach. You know, whatever. Would go to events. They said, why are you here? I'm just hanging out. But I was in a different class because I had long hair, so they didn't know what to make of that. And my daughter was dark-skinned, and that didn't fit either, so they weren't really sure what to do with me. But I knew, they wanted to know how long I was going to stay, and who the hell are you? Like, what are you doing here? So my students, if you see the kids standing next to me, they were very resistant to education. In Navajo language, schooling is called learning paper. Learning paper. That doesn't sound very good. And when I was first teaching, I felt like I was continually under attack. Like being in front of the class was a way that I could be like poked fun at, disrespected. It was horrible. Oh, it was just horrible. So over a long weekend, I decided I got to change everything totally. I'm not going to stand in front of these students anymore. So when they came back to school, I had these groups. It was all self-paced. I was not going to stand in front of them and have them do anything anymore. Self-paced, I made up assignments for them to do, wrote activities they were supposed to do, had the test station when they were ready to take a test on a certain unit. They went there and they took the test. If they wanted to put their head down and sleep the whole period, they could. It was up to them. And I had a big board where I marked off stuff as they went along. It was all on block schedule. I had students for 2 hours at a time. And I also had labs. It was nice because I only had one lab set up. Because when 2 or 3 students were ready to do the lab, I brought out the box and then they did that lab and then I put it away. And certain students just loved that. I had one student that had been failing everything. And now in that class, he had A++, while he was suspended from all of his other classes every day. They threw him out. He was just belligerent. But when he came to my class, he was such a relief for him just to sit and do his stuff and not listen to somebody up in the front, blah, 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 talking. And then one day I noticed that I was getting lab write-ups from students that hadn't done the lab. Like, wait a minute, I haven't brought out that equipment for 2 weeks. How can you have the lab write-up from that? And I found that it was the girls. The girls didn't want to do the labs. And finally I got them to confide in me that they didn't want to do the labs while the guys were watching. I said, well, you do the labs if I take it to this other room, because there was a separate room that was like kind of a lab room. And they said, yeah, they were really happy to do that. And so I would take, every time the girls wanted to do labs, I would take the equipment and take it and they would do it in a separate room. There was this huge distinction between the way the girls and the boys were being treated. Oh, I forgot one thing I was going to mention about, remember back in Botswana, that school, that middle school was even boys and girls, where the ones won the National Science Fair? Well, at the start of middle school, all the top students were the girls. At the end of middle school, all the top students were boys. And I tried to figure out, like, what am I doing something? Am I not calling on them enough? Am I not giving them feedback? Am I not making eye contact? What am I doing? I couldn't figure it out. And slowly, as time went by, I started realizing what was going on. Well, the girls matured a little bit faster than boys in elementary school. So it wasn't that big surprise. They were like just plain better students. But they didn't become worse students during the years that I had them, but they soon started realizing that they were not attractive to the boys if they were smarter than the boys, right? And that was a bad thing. So the girls, I'm not sure if they even did that really intentionally, but it was really like clear that from the beginning when I would first have them till they were graduating, the amount that they would volunteer would diminish. And they wanted the boys to give. So the boys would start feeling that they were smarter. Because again, yeah, like what's the old phrase that guys seldom make passes at girls that wear glasses? And the glasses is, you know, a symbol for being smart. All of us wearing glasses were the smart ones, right? Yeah. Yeah, and I found that really disturbing, but where I teach now, that doesn't seem to be a problem. So I think we're going to wrap this up because that's going to be like a half an hour, and I'm not going to carry on more with this because there's just going to be more and more educational stuff. Here's students. Oh, I decided on the Navajo Nation that project work was really good, so I created this program called PHELIS, Finding Extraterrestrial Life in the Solar System. Finding extraterrestrial, so its acronym was PHELIS. So I had students like analyze, you know, study different places where there could be life, and these students did study of Europa, and they designed a space probe. They wrote a bunch of reports and stuff like that, but they made this is the model of their probe. So it's on skis. So it was going to slide across the ice of Europa and scoop up life or whatever. It was going to look for life. And this was some of the other models of their things. And so we wrote up all what they did in the project, and we submitted it to this national project competition. And shockingly enough, we won grand prize nationally. This little school in the Navajo Nation, their work won the grand prize in the whole country for a project. And they had never imagined that they could be the first in anything before. So this was like, they couldn't understand that this could happen. I don't know what the moral of that is, but we still can't get teachers to go to Red Mesa. Like, nobody wants to go there. So let's throw it open to questions, and we can hang out and talk a little bit later, because I see that's an hour, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So if there's any questions, I'd be happy to try to answer them. Yes. Oh, thank you. Yes, sir.
In your teaching experience, have you made ever made any attempt to ascertain what a community's or a student's or a family's set of values were, and what their sense of cultural identity was, and whether or not anything that you were teaching them had anything to do with reinforcing their sense of personal identity?
Yes, that's huge. Yeah, that's really important. Yeah.
If what you're learning is a reinforcement of your personal identity that you have already brought into the classroom, that's actually a powerful motivator.
Yeah, you're absolutely right, and that's one of the things that teaching science lends it to this very, very well. So, like in Nepal, looking at how we could improve our water supply. In Botswana, dealing with disease, because I was teaching middle schools, including teaching health. And at the time, the AIDS epidemic was starting to take hold. So like these kinds of local problems were like big on everybody's mind. And so often those kind of issues were things that the students and even the parents and the community members would bring up to me. What can we do about this issue? What can we do about that one? And so yeah, it reinforced the types of things that they were doing. Where I'm in Salinas, a lot of what we deal with is things like dealing with sustainability. How can we like minimize our carbon footprint? How can we make a system that is going to be sustaining for a long time?
I'm not sure if that necessarily speaks to the issue of personal identity, though. I mean, that speaks to the issue of, can what you're teaching solve some local problems?
Yes.
And that kind of thing. But supposing, for example, you walk into a community that where everybody's identity is basically defined by their religion, and then you throw up intermediate algebra at them, and they have no clue what you're talking about. They don't see how that's related to how that's related to their relationship to God, and so to speak, so I mean, there are all these kind of mismatches that I think teachers should probably be very sensitive to. Because I think that will define their effectiveness as teachers.
Sure, I agree with that. Yeah. Sir?
Could you please comment on state credentialing and the relevance of that? Were you credentialed when you taught California?
Yeah, when I came back to California, then I got my credential, yeah. And then used that overseas as well.
What my question is kind of career in the system, which you seem to have eschewed. And, well, anyway, if you have some views on the state and credentialing and careers in teaching, please wax forth.
Yeah, so what I've seen from the way teaching, and probably some of you maybe are teaching in programs like that, I think that most teachers have already figured out how they're going to teach from having been through years and years of school long before they go to a credential program. And a credential program doesn't have a huge impact on how that person is going to teach. I think they've already kind of made up in their mind what they've seen other teachers do and what they feel works for them, rather than taking to heart whatever kind of rules. I know when I took those kinds of professional education courses, I did not get much out of them. They seemed to be a lot of just words that were not entirely useful for how I was dealing with students. I think a lot of being a teacher is almost like alchemy. And they're not dealing with the connection. Like right now, the school I'm in, they're very high into technology. They want all the students to have like little computers on their desks all the time without looking at the research that when there's an electronic thing like this on a table, even if it's not turned on, it reduces the level of communication. Just if it's there on the table. And my students, they never say, gee, I'm so glad we're spending so much time looking at the computer screen. What they want is connection with the teacher. Now that wasn't really important for me as a student, but I noticed that with my daughter, that she would do great if she connected with the teacher. And that was the #1 thing for her. And I think a lot of our students, that's what they want, is a connection with the teacher. And I don't think they can handle that with teacher credentialing programs. I don't think they teach that kind of personal interaction and how that's going to work. Yes, sir.
With your experience teaching in Botswana and Nepal and these other places, how effective do you feel like those programs are with like most of the community in the country at large, and how do you think that they could possibly be?
So I think it's how effective are they with?
How effective are they in the communities, and how do you think they could be improved if you think that they could be?
Oh, wow. Improving education. I think I think a big part of it is like this gentleman was saying, that they're not really connecting with what the values and the needs are of the students or the communities. It's a curriculum written by somebody sitting like far away. Right now in the country, we're being imposed with a national science standards that apparently everybody in the country is supposed to learn the same science. And I think that's a horrible way. I mean, because teachers have passions for certain subject areas, and they should be spending a lot of time on those areas that they have a passion for, because if the teacher has a passion, the students are going to get excited about it and learn that really well, rather than following a curriculum that's based on somebody sitting in Washington saying you should learn this and this and this and this. So like right now, things like topics like optics don't exist in the high school curriculum anymore. That's all gone. So certain whole subjects is all gone. And it's almost like making a really narrow gene pool that if we're all learning the same things, and there's nobody, I don't see why it's necessary that everybody in the country learns exactly the same things. It's much better as society if somebody learns a bunch of this and somebody else learns that and somebody learns the other thing. And they're going to find what they like best and like run with it. So if the student isn't excited by the teacher's passion, I think it's really a kind of a flat way of doing education. And that same model that we see in the US, that's what's happening around the world. We see national standards that really are limiting what people are being taught, rather than giving the teacher a chance to teach their passion. So yeah, I would say the great improvement would be let teachers teach what they find really exciting. Because then they're going to do way more than just like doing what's in class. They're going to do what I do, like have an observatory and take students on trips, because I have a passion for astronomy. And other schools don't have any kind of astronomy. Was there a question over here? Yeah.
Thanks for your fascinating teaching travels. I'm curious how, in your teaching physics and science in many developing countries in many languages, your experience in Nepal led to many teachers, students of yours becoming teachers. Didn't hear that quite as much in Botswana or on the Navajo Nation. What is it about teaching teachers to create a culture of science teaching in all these differential countries? Might be significant, might you extract from your thinking? How do you teach teachers to develop scientific teaching in the developing world?
Wow, I wish I knew, because if I could put that in a bottle and just spray it like all over the place, that would be really wonderful. I think my experience in Nepal is a lot timing. I was there when the first generation was really completing school and being at that level of education. They went around the schools. In terms of the Navajo Nation, our students that made it to college, it was a bloodbath. It was horrible. It was horrible to watch. Our best and brightest, we send them to university. And all the universities often free ride to Native American students. You know, they had no trouble getting scholarships. You know, all the universities wanted them for their demographics. But it was really tough for them, both in terms of the standards, high standards, but also where I was living in the Navajo Nation, they didn't live like the Hopi live in a tight community. It'd be a house here, and then miles there, another house, and miles there. So very almost isolated little family groups. So they're very close with their families. And so then to get thrown into a town where there's all these people packed together, and they were in this strange situation of having people all around them, but also feeling really alone and isolated, it was difficult on them emotionally. Besides really difficult for them academically. And so we had very few of our students really surviving. So the solution they're trying to do in the Navajo Nation is community colleges. They're trying to establish a lot of community colleges so they can go through the college level, at least the first 2 years, close to home with other Navajo students. And I think that would be the kind of thing, like try to bring that community, that education close to home. Yes, sir.
How do you feel about flipped classroom? It just seems like you did a little bit of that in drug and travel. So the teacher, not as a teacher, not as some figure that's passing on knowledge to which they are the gatekeeper, but more of a coach, more of someone that's just a bystander facilitating. You know, I'm not any more important than you are. We're all going to see here at the same time. I might have been through some experiences, and I can show you how to navigate this stuff.
That's how I feel about that. Yeah, exactly. Exactly. I mean, that's one of the great things about teaching science, because we can set up a situation where students can, laboratory, activity, where students can figure that out. Like, I don't have to teach them. They're going to teach themselves. They're going to discover that. But it's guided. It's guided teaching, just like a coach guides, sets them on the right path so it can be efficient. I think that's a very effective way of teaching, just like you said. Yeah, thank you. So we wrapping it up? Anybody that wants to come down here and hang out, we can do that for a while? Yeah. I'll turn on the light.